Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Kalle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You have a really interesting background, very varied. Well, I'm sure we're going to get to some of that, but right now you're the CEO of Veritas. So I'm always very curious kind of how people got into the roles that they are today. So what was it that attracted you to that role? I think you started in summer of 2022. And what was it like the first kind of like 6 months stepping into this role as CEO?
Yes, so as we all know, you sort of many times slip into things sort of a bit by accident or incident, meaning that you don't plan for it too much. This is my 4th year now, starting, and the person who was the CEO before me got a new job. They needed a new CEO. I've been working with Accenture, a global, large, probably the largest consulting company in the world by many ways of measuring it. Worked with financial services, did a lot of transformations in banking and insurance. So been exposed to the finance industry a lot, and I'd been on a number of board of directors positions in the industry. So then one day I was driving my son to one of his hobbies. I remember that there was a headhunter calling saying that you should consider discussing this position with me, which I then ended up doing. And it was not an obvious decision because I had just fairly recently had a promotion and really interesting task within Accenture, where I was working with global telecom and had exciting clients in Japan, China, foremost Silicon Valley, and here in the Nordics with Nokia, Ericsson, and other big players. So really interesting portfolio of work, where I had just 6 months before quit my task within financial services to take on this task. And the pandemic was just at that point calming down, and had foreseen myself spending a lot of time in Silicon Valley. Felt really excited about that. So it was a quite challenging discussion I had with myself, considering whether to do this or not, because I really was kind of excited about what I was about to do within Accenture, had just started it, but then something still caught my interest, and felt that this was a really interesting opportunity. A long company with good reputation, and a company that was of a size that was still sort of not easy, but manageable in a sense. Yeah. Accenture, for instance, a huge, really, really nice company in many ways, but we were like 500,000 people there. So whatever you would do, it would be like a huge ship to try to turn to one direction or another. And here you would be maybe more hands-on to get from one place to another, which we'll come back to later on, I presume. But I think that was probably one of the dimensions that really then ended up affecting my decision to say, yes, okay, I'm willing to be part of the process, to become the new CEO. And then in the recruitment process, I was a bit, maybe not bullish, but quite bold, where I said that you guys need to change. We need to, the market was changing because of new regulation that was making the pricing of the insurance companies more transparent, where you'd be able to compare apples to apples, or at least almost. And I portrayed a situation for the board where I said that we're going to have to do quite a lot of changes in this company if we're going to be able to survive and even grow. And I was a bit bold, and I figured, well, I have nothing to lose. I have a nice job. I like my job. So if I'm going to do this, it has to be in a way which I believe in, and I see the possibilities. And to my, I don't know, surprise is maybe not the right word, but the board was very, I would say, progressive, and also saw a need to do changes. So they were very sort of positive to my ideas, even though they were maybe on a scale of a quite conservative pension company, a bit bold. So when I realized that they liked my thinking, that was probably the point where I realized I wanted the job.
Yes.
When it resonated so well with them, because I haven't maybe anticipated that they would be as positive as they were. And with that, we really found each other in the dialogue with the recruitment group that was discussing with the candidates that were in the process. And then it was, I think, a good match, and we found each other. So then I ended up getting the job and leaving Accenture, which was not at all in my plans. So that's almost 4 years ago. So here we are.
Very interesting, completely different. I mean, going from like big international company clients, Silicon Valley, to now focusing mostly on Finnish SMBs, I guess. You mentioned you presented these ideas for change, and I think maybe for people who don't know, I mean, you've had a lot of success with Veritas in the last 4 years. Lots of improvements, growth. Just now, or just last year was the record-breaking in terms of customer acquisition, I believe. And it is a very conservative industry, and it's a very tightly regulated industry. So what were the things that you presented to the board what was the kind of strategy, and is it the same strategy that you've been executing now for the last 4 years?
Yeah, a refined version of it. What we did then was that I said that we're going to have to do a 1-year program of change, like a 1-year turnaround program, quite tough program. I had been a strategy consultant, so I mean, all these strategy consultants have these playbooks where you do like a turnaround type of playbook. So we did a 1-year change program, which we started in 21. And then after that, did a 3-year growth strategy, which is then 23, 24, and this year 25. Last year, we can come back to that as well maybe later on, but we already last year in 24 sort of reached the goals that we had set for the end of this year. So we're sort of 1 year ahead of the program. So we will exceed our goals quite substantially because we have already also had a really good Q1 now, which is almost over 2 weeks to go, but it looks really promising. So I'm quite optimistic around 25 as well, even though we need to be always humble around those things, but fairly optimistic. And meaning that we have had a growth strategy, yes, but first it was a change program. The change program was about becoming as competitive as possible. We had a cost structure that was not geared to support the growth. Because we moved from the industry shifted from having a system where an employer would always pay the same fee to all pension companies, and then later on you would get reimbursements based on how much money was sort of left over for the pension partner. And that was not very transparent, and it was really hard for employers to really understand how much they were paying for the services. The big chunk of what you pay is the pension fee, and that's of course fixed, but then the little premium that you pay for the management of the pension services, which you pay to the pension provider, that was geared in a very untransparent way before. And then when this transparent legislation, which was changed, and the first year when this was applied was 23, so this is now the 3rd year when this new legislation is in place. So when we started this change program in 21, we realized we have a bit more than a year to get to a place where we can say that we have an attractive pricing. We had very high cost structure, and then I saw a few really basic things. There was not a focused idea around growth, meaning we hadn't defined for ourselves that which type of clients are the clients where we can best serve them. There was not enough focus on the sales. There was not enough focus on the customer experience in the so-called sweet spot group. And the whole client sort of promise, what is it that we're actually selling? What is the unique selling proposition in relation to the 3 other companies in the industry? We have 3 competitors, only 4 companies in this industry in Finland anymore. And with this, we had the lack of focus. So the start was a lot around cost takeout, but also around working on the levers and the unique selling proposition. So we did a really radical first year, cut costs more than 20% in 1 year with layoffs and outsourcings and a lot of IT changes, process changes, reorganized all the basic processes we have in the pension process, in the insurance process. So a lot of effectivization, a lot of focus on productivity, but in parallel, a very sort of future-oriented work around how do we make ourselves the most attractive player in the market. So it was interesting parallel work, which one was quite sort of harsh cost cutting and making ourselves sort of as effective as possible. And on the other hand, then knowing that we're going to soon start boosting sales and focus on the experience. There was a really good basis and foundation to build on, because we had still, the big strength we had was that we had always historically as well been a company that really focused and did this customer experience part well. So we had a lot of happy customers. So there was a foundation to build on. So that's pretty much the story. And then we did this 1 year very harsh and effective transition program. We were able to conclude that on time. And then we adapted a growth strategy in August of 22, which we, practically speaking, started working with already then, but formally it was like a strategy from 23 January onward. So now we did our best year ever in 23, and then we were able to beat that last year in 24, and I'm pretty certain that we're going to beat 24 this year. Really nice journey so far.
It seems like it's always, I'm amazed by how much you can accomplish when you focus on just a few basic things and execute really well on them consistently and like systematically and do things in the right order. And then you can, because it doesn't sound like you did anything that was necessarily like very out there. It was just realizing kind of your natural position in the market and then doubling down on that. Pretty
much so, yes. And I think that's a good sort of conclusion that, I mean, we haven't done anything that's rocket science in the sense that we in almost any business, you need to be productive and effective. It's rare that you can be something else, but we had not been enough focused on productivity, and hence our price point was not good enough. That's one very basic thing. And then it's clear that when you have a product, an insurance product that is mandatory by law in this country, and terms and conditions for the insurances are also set by the authorities, meaning that you cannot differentiate yourself with more attractive insurance policies or other things in relation to your competition. It means that you will be competing a bit with the price, but then with how you meet the client, how you ensure that the client gets a good customer experience, and with the fairly narrow scope we have around supporting our employer clients with how they support their own employees in their ability and to work, where we have a lot of people who get burned out in this country, a lot of people, too many people who have to leave the job market too early because they don't cope with their job or they have problems, physical problems. But unfortunately, the large proportion of those who don't feel that they can work any longer, it's around mental and psychological health issues, so burnouts and other type of things. So we have a team working really tightly with our clients around supporting them in preventing those type of challenges to occur. Of course, you can't prevent everything, but then also ensuring that when you have challenges, that you get support also from us on an early stage in order to still be able to turn the tide and help those individuals to get back to work through rehab and other things which we do. So with all of this, you can differentiate yourself a bit, but also that part is very regulated.
Yes.
But nevertheless, so we worked a lot with the differentiation and have been, I think, successful there. So those, it's been a really interesting journey so far.
Yeah. One thing that, because like I said, it's, I mean, the basic service that you offer is fixed by law. There's 3 other players, all of them bigger than you. So you have to focus really on the differentiation and providing some kind of value-added services. And clearly it's worked, because I think last year you had 6,000 new, I think, customers, which is a lot in Finland. It's not a very big country. So my mind immediately goes to, like, because I've always also seen you be very active in meeting customers, traveling around, speaking to all kinds of different companies. Is that like a core part of that informs your strategy, like the insights that you get from customers, talking directly to them, hearing how the problems that they experience? Does that kind of drive not just you, obviously across the whole organization, but those kind of like customer conversations generate insights that you use to further kind of refine your service, your value-added services?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, when we meet clients, we hear about their needs on how they are able to support their own employees in being able and having the energy to work, etc. So in that respect, the topic we were just discussing, definitely you always get new ideas and that. But then I think being close to your clients is really important also when you look at the loyalty perspective. That your clients really feel, and I mean, we are genuinely very interested in our clients, and if you just send them a little email here and there, or to get some info email that is sent to all your clients, they don't really necessarily feel that important, because everyone does that. So sort of being really also physically close to your clients has it's of huge importance. It's really valued and appreciated. We are the only pension provider in this country in the competition of 4, where we are the only ones who actually designate a dedicated client responsible person to every client. So to get your own client service person, which also means that when clients have a need to discuss something in relation to their pension issues, they really know how to turn to, whom to turn to, because we have this stereotype, which is unfortunately just a stereotype, but it's reality into many financial services companies. I'm just not just talking about pension companies now, but banks and other insurance companies, where it's really hard. You have to really make an effort to get to talk to anyone, to get a meeting with your bank or your insurance company. And this is something that many people, normal people, will recognize and even a bit cynically sort of comment that it's really challenging to get a meeting. And we give them a direct number that this is your person. We pick up the phone if you call, which we do. And we have given a promise that we pick up the phone in less than 20 seconds. I think the average has been around 11 last year. So we really pick up the phone and people get the help they need. And already that is a huge, unique selling point, that you get help and that you don't have to sit there for hours to wait for someone to pick up the phone. So this is really simple in a sense. It's a bit old school even. I mean, then we have we've also invested a lot in our digital services, and actually a bigger and bigger proportion of our clients handle their own own things, logging on to our services, and they can serve themselves, and they're really happy to do so. But I think they're still deep down happy to know that if there's something that you can't handle yourself, or you need support or help or advice, that you can pick up the phone, either when you're on the website, which is quite normal, that you log in, then there's something, and then you might call while you're there, and you get the advice and you can finish it off yourself. That you know that you're going to get the service and advice you need without a huge delay and without spending a lot of your time. So I think that's probably the most important change that we did. I mean, we had this before, but we hadn't maybe articulated it enough. And then the other thing was around that Finland is a small country, but still big in many ways, both geographical distances, but also we have a huge variety of companies, where we have big global companies, and then we have a lot of entrepreneurs and SMEs. And we have, I think, been able to define for ourselves that what type of companies, what profile of companies are companies that mostly value our service concept and have focused a lot of our sales on that. And it's clear that it resonates, that certain size of clients, the type of clients that are already big enough to have employees and they have a number of regular issues that they need to handle. So they have a certain service need, but they maybe tend to be a bit too small to be attractive as a focus group for our bigger competitors. They, of course, also have clients of that nature, more than we do, numerically speaking, but clearly not maybe focusing or not necessarily always succeeding in making these clients feel that they're really important, that we have shown these clients, this size of companies, that they are super important to us and they get the premium service that they deserve and they are very loyal, and they also tell many entrepreneurs hang out with other entrepreneurs. So we see a phenomena growing where clients come to us, even though we have a lot of sales efforts going on all the time, but it's really nice to have phone calls, not just me, but many of my colleagues and our people call the company, and that people come to us as well, saying that they heard that from someone else that here you get a good client experience, so they actively want to become our clients. And that's a nice phenomena we've seen a lot about, really recently seen that phenomena. So it's a bit of a snowball effect.
Yeah, exactly. Do you, because what you said makes so much sense, and it also like ties back into what you said about the cost cutting in the beginning, because to dedicate those resources and given that customer experience, you can't have this huge overhead because at some point it's not going to work out. But do you find that companies generally don't understand or appreciate the importance of what you just said, kind of like the old school way? Because I assume most CEOs don't spend as much time with their customers maybe as you do. They don't travel to meet them. Maybe there's always other things to do. So I'm not surprised that they can't find the time. But do you find that companies generally they just don't understand that there's a real benefit, financial benefit, to making those types of investments that you've been doing at Veritas?
Well, first of all, I have the sort of very strong conviction that the CEO is the number one salesperson and number one customer experience officer in the company. And if you're not there in the client interface, then you're not going to succeed, no matter if you sell cars or pension services or mobile phones. That my strong conviction is that you need to be there in the front line.
Yeah.
And you also get I have the most wonderful colleagues, and I think that the fact that you're all in there in the front line, that also inspires them, and they go there with you, and they want to do it. They also want to do it. They get inspired to do so. But I mean, my conviction is that there can't be too many other important things for a CEO than his or her clients, customers, sales and client service. So I see myself, and that is my most important task. Then of course I spend a few days a week-ish on different kinds of investments. We have a huge investment portfolio, but I have a really professional team and their core task is to do that. But in the end I have the responsibility, so a fair proportion of my time is around our investments. And that has to have enough time as well. So it's a balance, but it's a balance that works. And then, as all CEOs, I have a lot of administrative tasks, some of them more inspiring than others. But I think it's a matter of priorities, and no business is like another one. So it's not easy to start giving really good advice to someone else. They usually know their business better than I would do. But I would still think that a CEO that doesn't have time for his clients or sales or client experience is probably focusing wrong. That would be my a bit provocative statement. So I've just decided that I have time for our clients, and I spend a certain part of my time, and my assistant who helps me with my schedules has sort of dedicated a fair amount of time just for client work. And there's always clients who want to meet, but proactively, meaning they contact us, invite us to come there, or then involved in sales or or we actively contact also clients and offer a possibility to meet the leadership in a company, and they're usually very happy to meet us. So
Yeah.
and you get so much from meeting these, and also since we're in the investment business, in the sense that we're also in a sense an asset manager, we have 5 billion of assets that we manage. We meeting so many different type of companies also gives you a really good feel on where the economy is going. So it's really supporting for the investment business.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty unique in that sense. So what's your kind of feel when you've spoken to so many different types of companies? Like you said, in Finland we have a big variety in all kinds of different industries, and we have lots of companies that are top, like world leaders in their specific field. What's your kind of sense of the Finnish economy and maybe the Finnish potential, given that we have had very little growth since 2008? Why is that the case, and what needs to change for that to change?
Well, this is the sort of $1,000 question, or actually it's the $1 billion question.
Yes, yeah.
Or even bigger than $1 billion, unfortunately. We've had this spring a number of growth working groups engaged by the government and others to sit down and really try to scratch their heads around this big question that you're posing. And I think the answers from the groups that has been working this year and last year around this topic sort of showed that there is no one easy answer, because the growth groups that had gotten a task to deliver answers and suggestions and propositions around what should be done, what type of initiatives would change the direction of Finland. There were very few new ideas, I would say, and many of them were quite conventional, some of them more bold than others, but shows that there is no sort of easy answer, clear medicine, or not just one pill that you can take that will take away the pain. But I would say that, I mean, I have a background of working in the public administration and been a member of a few governments, etc. So I've, in a sense, taken a position that one shouldn't start sort of doing politics as a company CEO. So I normally try to avoid this question, not because I don't have views, but because it's sort of not my cup of tea anymore. But I would, in general, believe that we first of all need to get away from a world and a society that is too driven by the state and the public sector. The proportion of the GDP in Finland that is public sector is too big.
What is it roughly? Is it like 30-40%?
No, it's more. And
wow.
I'm not going to give you the last number because it's probably going to be wrong. But the point is that it's been growing.
Yeah.
And it's in European or global standards high.
Yeah.
And we are not rich enough or productive enough to carry that cost. And that's why the public sector economy is so badly on red numbers, and we have a moral problem again. I mean, I have small children. Maybe you have as well, I don't know. But those of us who have small children have, I think, moral responsibility to ensure that also future generations of Finns have a good society and country to live in. And if we take more and more depth on, at some point it's not going to be sustainable, and then you're going to have a huge burden to carry for the next generations. And I always find that sort of morally questionable. And hence we would need to be willing now to make prioritizations where we would also need a conversation around what are the priorities for the public sector. Sort of still to your question around the growth topics, in all these groups that came now with all these initiatives now during the winter and early spring, there were a lot of good suggestions, but then many of the comments around these initiatives were that, yes, really good initiative, but that's going to cost a lot of money. So my point would be that we would really need to boil down to that what is the core tasks of the public administration and what we call welfare state, and we would need to focus on doing those things well, and then we would need to also accept that we will prioritize away a lot of things in order to make room for maybe those costs that will be generating growth potentially. And then I think so we need to get away from this really state-centered thinking. That I think would be the most sort of on an overarching level, the thing we need to get to. And then also this strong belief in that the state can generate growth. The state is an enabler at best, where the enabling factors are probably making sure that we have an educated labor force, that the tax regime is attractive, which in many ways it is, but in many ways it's the other way around. So we have certain parts of the tax regime that seems to be quite attractive, but then we have also parts of it that it's very unattractive, and that needs to be addressed. And then we need interesting infrastructure, all the basic sort of levers that enable growth. And I think we haven't really focused on the core, and we haven't been able to prioritize what the public sector actually can and should do when we actually have less. At least for now, we have less resources, less. We should have a smaller budget because we're living beyond our means right now. So I think we haven't really seen the conversation. I at least would have hoped when we a year ago heard that the government was planning all these growth measures. So personally, not too optimistic around bigger changes right now, which is a direction that is challenging in the sense that the Finland's development has been going in the wrong direction for a very long time, as you alluded to before. So we would need a lot of fundamental changes where it's clear that it's entrepreneurs and companies who create growth. The state ain't going to do that.
Yeah. I agree completely with everything you said, and I think it's really interesting that you didn't go to any specific policy like we need to make this change here or we need to make this investment, but it's more so fundamental understanding. The public conversation need to change. And I feel like in Finland, we don't really understand, we haven't internalized how serious the situation is, because we're still, we think about the PISA results from like way back when. We still have, in many ways, like an incredibly high functioning society, but we can't afford it, Like someone living with a credit card, like it's a great one, I guess, as long as you keep doing it, but at some point you got to pay the bills. And
if we weren't in a Eurozone, I mean, this is getting into sort of a more GDP type of conversation, more sort of macro level, macroeconomic discussion. But if we weren't in a Eurozone, if we would be a non-Eurozone country, I would claim that we would already have come to a point where our spreads, the price Finland pays for taking on more state debt would have gone so high already that we would be in trouble, meaning that we would either pay too much or not get any loans. So I think we're already sort of past the point where this is healthy. And I agree personally very much with you that people haven't internalized it, or too few have. There are those who have. My bigger concern would be that there will come a younger generation that will realize this, and they will vote with their feet.
Yeah.
This is a global world. We have a European labor market. It's really easy to go somewhere else.
Yes.
So we will also lose a lot of good people because they will see that this is going to be an expensive place to live because taxes will remain really high, etc. So I'm quite worried, but at the same time, we have so many really inspiring, good entrepreneurs and companies in this country. So we have a lot of potential, and we have a lot of things going for us. We are a safe society. We have good schools. We have a clean environment. We have a lot of potential in the energy sector, green energy, climate-friendly energy. A lot of levers and potential that is partially untapped. So just doing things right, but I would still claim that sort of we need a thinking around a more focused state, more focused municipality, and sort of getting to what are the basic things that we can afford to take care of, and those things to of course be taken care of in a professional and really good way. But then we need to also be able to prioritize things that we won't do anymore in order to create room for growth. Because if you believe that we're just going to carry on more taxes and then the state will decide that here we're going to have some growth, That's a bit of the thinking that we have now.
I agree.
And that's been the way of doing things for a long time, and it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And have the highest respect for our decision makers in our parliament and government, but they seldom know how to create growth, and that's maybe not their task even.
Like you said, we have all the prerequisites to be a great enabler. Like you mentioned, all the assets, and we have rule of law, very stable society. I'm guessing like the corporate structure. I mean, very high trust. So we could be a society that becomes really attractive for companies to locate here. And I think it's interesting with the voting of the feet, because I don't think also people realize how fragile a country like Finland can be. I remember I looked into the numbers, I forget why, but in California, for instance, they had a lot of people leave during COVID. California is a big state, 40 million people. But if you look at income tax revenue, which is a big part of the state total revenue, I think it was 40,000 people in California are like 40 or 50% of the personal income tax. So if those 40 or 50,000 people leave, it's a small percent of the total, but basically the state is bankrupt. So we've got like a pretty small number of people who are responsible not just for income, tax income, but for a huge part of like investment and productivity. And if they go to, there's a lot of options they could go.
We already see that, even though we had this, the most interesting, or maybe not the most interesting, but the question that has gathered the most interest during this winter and spring in this growth conversation that we've had in the public sphere here in Finland was around the inheritance tax and how much tax you pay if you inherit money from your parents, or you have a family company that will move to the next generation. The reason why this is topical, then it's for political decision makers to decide what they want to do with the tax, but is that we already see a phenomena, and we have seen where a lot of the families and people who have capital have relocated. We've lost so much capital from this country, and we've never been a very capital intense country, on the contrary. So we need to figure out how we get private capital to feel that this is the best place to keep your capital, and that is a really, really topical question. And I think that's why. But I believe that the question around the discussion around it, which we saw in the public, was a bit angled in an interesting, not so good way, where it was a lot about whether it's right or wrong that if you inherit a company that you should pay tax or not. And I don't question that dimension of the discussion. It's definitely relevant, but my thinking would still be that we should have discussed it around the enabler factor. That what is the enabling factor of the dimension or fact that we would have, or wish, or goal that we would be able to reallocate or allocate back some of the capital that we've lost to more interesting tax regimes, and how do we attract new capital and capital to be allocated to Finland. And that's the question that is the relevant question. And I think too little of the discussion was around that dimension of it, which is the original dimension to why this is on the table. But we'll see what the decision makers will conclude.
Yeah, it feels like another thing we haven't internalized is that it's a global competition for talent and capital, and no decision that we make is in a vacuum. And people actually one can feel that, okay, we increase the tax on these rich people, it shouldn't matter to them. But they're individuals, and they may find that it actually does matter, and they may vote with their feet. Like it's like you said, there's a moral aspect, and you can talk about that. But there's also just we can measure the impact. When Norway increased the wealth tax, there was a net negative effect immediately because people moved to Switzerland or France. And you can criticize it, but you can also, from a Norway's, the state point of view, it's that was a bad decision. It did not increase tax revenue; it decreased tax revenue, and probably there's productivity losses that are going to be very far-reaching.
It's a very good example that's been discussed a lot, and it shows that the tax policy is one of the key enablers. And then I think it's a bit about ambition as well, that One of the challenges that I saw with all the discussion around the various growth initiatives were that the ambition level was always that, okay, we improve this thing a little bit, so we tweak this just a little. I think we need to be a bit more disruptive in the thinking and a bit more bold, and understand that Finland is as a on a macroeconomic level, we can say that Finland is actually in a very, very, very bad position. We are the new Greece of the EU. We were the ones who 15 years ago were very critical for good reasons to what was happening in certain Mediterranean countries. Greece, of course, being an extreme example in the sense that there were also some tweaking of the public numbers that were reported, but nevertheless, the point was that they were living beyond their means, and we were one of the first ones as a country to question that also quite vocally. But now we are the ones that have almost the worst numbers in the Eurozone, and that's been going on for a long time. And that means that we actually need a bit of a more disruptive approach. Take Ireland as an example. They were also in a really deep crisis 10, 15 years ago, more 15, and they were able to turn. So it shows that you can win. So I would also, from that sense, if you want to end on a more optimistic note, this part of the discussion, you can do Ireland is a good example that you can change things. And actually Greece as well. That was the sort of, they've also had a pretty good development. They probably still have their challenges, so nothing is black and white. But I do believe that they are encouraging examples.
And one maybe encouraging example is the stock market development here in Finland from year to date. You probably know the numbers, but it's been good.
It's been a really refreshing change. I mean, and it's been really odd. I mean, last year, 24, the U.S. stock market was saw a really positive development and awesome year in the U.S. stock market last year, and then Europe was quite a disappointment, and the most disappointing was the Helsinki stock market, and then now we've seen a sort of 180 turnaround where the US stock market has been really challenging. It's been very turbulent, as we know. There is this new guy in the White House. He's been disrupting a lot of things, and it's been really a bumpy ride in the US stock market. But then on the other hand, Europe has been really yielding so far very well. And then Finland and the Helsinki stock market has been really positive in the 2-3 first months. But at the same time, a year is a long time. Also, the US stock market was really positive the first, 6-7 weeks of the year. And then now it's been, of course, really bad. Meaning that we are now mid-March. So if you look at it from an annualized perspective, which many of us tend to do in our work, and we look at we have very long money in a sense, but we do sort of on a calendar year basis look at our assets and how they yield. And anything can still happen, especially in a world where you have a lot of geopolitical challenges. You have wars, you have trade wars now with tariffs and all of that. So I would say that anything can still happen. So very seldom I felt that it's as hard as it is right now to predict where this is going to end. We have a lot of factors actually implying that there should be a lot of potential for a great year as an institutional investor, but then we have all these uncertainty factors. So super hard to predict where this year will end.
Like you mentioned earlier, so you guys have 5 billion euros in assets under management, and obviously there's probably some regulation around how you need to diversify, and so. But any kind of general thoughts about, like you said, it's hard to predict, but I'm thinking different asset classes, Europe versus the US, and maybe especially technology, AI, everything that's happening there. What are your kind of general thoughts on where you think there's going to be some attractive returns going forward?
Well, if you go back to last year, I mean, we saw this magnificent growth of the sort of magnificent companies that are even named as a small group with that name, partially driven by a bit of a boom or boost or hype. But at the same time, of course, companies like NVIDIA really delivering from quarter to quarter really impressive growth numbers. At the same time, of course, getting the expectations to rise to a sky high level, and then things like DeepSeek and other innovations coming in and sort of a bit challenging and even disrupting their position. Maybe healthy, who knows? But anyway, it's clear that some of the technology companies in the US market have been coming to a point where they're a bit overpriced. But then we also see that some of the companies there, like Tesla, is under a bit of an attack because of ethical or principle reasons, where the largest owner of the company and the CEO has been profiling himself a bit outside the business sphere here lately, and that probably affects the stock prices as well. But we see then certain industries gaining from the geopolitical changes, for instance, the defense sector being one, of course. But then we also see other tides of it, these turning in the short term, for instance, the US policy that has changed quite a lot around climate change, where you suddenly have a regime or a government in the US who wants to have more fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are great again, so to speak. And we can see that, for instance, one very iconic company, Finnish Neste, biggest oil company or energy company here in that field, being one of the world leaders in renewable fuels, finding it really hard to manage in this market, where demand and predicted demand for renewables is suddenly declining. All of it. This is very surprising in a sense. If someone would have said that 5 years ago that this will change, it would have felt like an unlikely, almost black swan type of development. So this is maybe a bit around the uncertainty, and also showing that maybe companies and industries that haven't been predicted as winners suddenly are. We saw these past days, and this can change when our listeners will see this pod. Maybe the world has changed again because it's been so fast. But we had some of the steel companies in Finland and Sweden rising to really affecting ups and downs with the potential tariffs that the US might put on the EU imported steel, and then the prediction for these companies changing either to the positive or the negative. So this whole type of trade war setup that we see rising again, which is a bit of a tide change, where I think we've had still the long-term perspective is that we have decreased trade barriers globally, and we've had a globalization driven by lower and lower trade barriers. And now if this really seems to change, at least for the upcoming 3-4 years, as the US government will be at least driving policies of this kind for at least that time being, then we'll see what happens in the next US elections in 3-4 years. But that's a different story. 3.5 years to the next US presidential elections, then things could change. But this is where we are for 3-4 years, and that sort of winds the clock back around many things. So we can maybe see that companies that were portrayed as a bit of a sunsetting business maybe suddenly can get an upswing from that. And I don't think the long-term perspective will change, but it's going to be very turbulent, and many companies that have been portrayed as clear winners might not be the winners that we believed. So as investors, we won't revisit our values, and we are a value-driven investor, but we really need to revisit some of the beliefs around the big trends.
Yeah. It's interesting, like you mentioned, like there are some big trends that have absolutely changed, that felt like they were rock solid. Like this is a mega trend that's going to play out over the next few decades, and now maybe at least there's going to be a pause. You mentioned defense. So I want to go into that, given that it's Well, especially given your background, you were Minister of Defense in Finland in 2012, I think. You stepped into that role. So now there's talk of 800 billion that's going to be spent on European level. Do you think that Europe is serious about rearming, and what does it mean for Finland? I'm thinking, if we leave the security aspects, that's a very long podcast in and of itself. But if you just the economic impact, what do you think?
I mean, first of all, we do need to step up the game here. The US has carried an unproportional responsibility of European security for decades, partially because they wanted to do so. So let's keep that in mind as well. But it's good to say that now President Trump and his administration is accused of sort of leaving Europe and all of that. I've heard these same words from President Obama with my own ears in the NATO Wales summit in 2014, which was my last big defense summit before I left politics and went back into business. So this is not a Republican or Trump view that the US needs to focus on other things and that Europe needs to carry its own responsibility. This was also the policy of the Democrats, and Obama and Biden regime has had the same message with, of course, much more soft way of passing on the message. But we, as Europeans, or many European countries, and maybe as a collective, didn't maybe take the message seriously. And then we saw what happened in Ukraine, first with Crimea, and then later on Luhansk and Donetsk, and then now a more or less full-scale war for the past 3 years. So it's clear that we should have had taken the message seriously before, and so it's high time to do so. Finland is a bit of the odd bird here because we just recently, as we all know, joined NATO and historically have carried the responsibility of our national defense ourselves. So here locally in our country things are quite well in relation, and we have a credible defense, especially now topped up with a NATO membership. So I think our position is quite strong, but we have many European countries who are big and economically fairly strong that haven't invested in their defense. So this is a welcome change, even though the reasons for welcome change are tragical with the war in Ukraine still going on. So this will definitely pose a big possibility for the defense industry, and we need a credible defense industry in Europe as well. We are also quite reliable. I mean, we have so many US companies, and it's good. I still believe in global trade, and I believe we're going to need a lot of US technology, and US defense companies will definitely also gain from the fact that Europe needs to invest more, but we also need to ensure that the European defense industry can develop and has room for development. So it's going to be an interesting sector as an investor to invest in, and it's clear that it's also, we have seen a lot of the discussion around whether it's morally right to invest in defense. Many institutional investors have historically ruled out investments in this sector, and I would also rule out investments in nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and those type of weapons. But in general, it's still so that it's been proven now in the past decade, and especially in the past years with the war in Ukraine, that defending democracy, rule of law, and human rights is not only going to happen through diplomacy, which is still the foremost and best way to do it, but it also, unfortunately, has been proven that also defense and the products that the defense industry produces are a necessary part of defining the values that we stand for, and hence it would be really wrong for institutions like us to rule out also investments in this sector. And we have never, as a company, my employer, done that, but many others have. So it's clear that we also need capital investments in this sector to support this development, but it's clear that with the strong boost in demand that will come from change of policy, for instance in Germany, that is the biggest economy in EU, it's clear that will have a profound impact on the demand. So a big change ahead of us, clearly there. And then hopefully with the change of policy, the US will also have a more moderate, less dramatic view on how they will possibly back out, so to speak. In the long term, I understand if the US want to have a smaller role, but I think it would be in our all interest if there is no drastic change there in the short term. But that's more of a political question. But
yeah. That's a great answer. We covered a lot during this conversation. So basically, I mean, your kind of view of the economy and the kind of the landscape for growth is kind of there's some turbulence ahead.
It's twofold. I mean, for Finland, there are many predictions showing that the economy could grow this year. I think that's good news for everyone, but it will be modest growth. I mean, that's clear, and it's also very evident that there are so many questions around where the world economy is going. So nothing that one would like to predict for certain. But Finland needs growth. That's something that it's easy to underscore, and most likely, I believe that the growth and the future of Finnish economy will be with smaller and medium-sized companies.
Yes.
We do need, of course, larger Finnish stock-listed and non-listed larger companies and corporates to grow, and they need to have their ability to grow as well with Finland as a basis. But we need to really also, and that's maybe for our next conversation, but we have seen a number of really interesting startups grow quite strong, and I believe that many of the ingredients for understanding what the levers are to support growth are probably found around those companies and what they did right.
Yeah, I just saw some stat that Finnish startups are generating an aggregate of 10 billion euros in revenue. The vast majority is export. So that's not a non-significant number.
Quite right, and we need to somehow double click on what they did right and what we need to do for more of them to grow and for us to attract more talent and more investments. There are, I mean, as we all know, a number of really inspiring phenomena like Slush, but we haven't really, I think, untapped the whole potential from that. So we haven't been able to really get to the next level there as a society. I mean, the event in itself, yes, but what we could do out of that. So that's in a sense, if you want to again get to a very positive note, that shows that there is still the potential.
I totally agree. I feel like we're definitely punching below our weight, if you can say that.
Yeah.
Like we haven't untapped all the potential that we have in the human capital that exists in Finland.
Quite right. I perfectly agree. We are definitely not delivering on the potential that we have as a society. So we need to get there.
I feel like that's a good note to end the conversation on. So Kalle, thank you so much for taking time. Let's absolutely do a follow-up episode sometime in the future, and hopefully, we're back to growth, and a number of things have changed. But thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of the year. I hope you guys are able to exceed all the targets that you've set.
We are optimistic around that, but on top of optimism, you need hard work and a humble attitude. So I think that will take us there. And thanks for a really interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.